friends, we are popping on here today to just go through some fun tips for things that I wish I knew knew sooner into my crochet journey. I am currently working on making a whole bunch of ice cream cones for my markets and such. This was a easy kind of brainless thing to do while I was on a Zoom call with a number of crocheters in my mentoring program. So that was good to do while we were having our discussion. So I'm just I've got lots of tops here that I need to make cones for. So I'm just gonna make some cones while we chat here today. So a few things that I wish that I had known sooner, earlier in my crochet journey, and maybe not fretted over quite so much in the beginning. And still, some of them are still applicable, and I have to remind myself of repeatedly. So first is, as you're weaving in your ends, don't tie them off super short. Sometimes as individuals pull at stitches or a keychain pulls, if it's a smaller item, the stitches and yarn move a bit, and as things get squished and played with, sometimes those knots, when they're super short, and then the subsequent strings that have been cut off super short, then tend to come to the surface. So by leaving longer tails with your items, it can be woven through your stuffing a little bit better, and it will catch and not as easily come out and poke out of your items. So that is something that I wish I knew as I try to conserve yarn and not leave as many scrap pieces around. Things tend to shift, and we've had some issues with little things just poking out of items that I had made. Next is the quality of your yarn and your hooks matter. The cheap yarns can be very hard on the hands. They can be very hard on the skin and the fingers. They're not as fun to touch and play with. And certainly that makes an important note when selling as well. If it's hard on your hands when you're crocheting it, think about the individual or the child that may be wanting to snuggle with that item. Use it as a pillow. If it's scratchy against your fingers, imagine how it's going to be against your face. So certainly the economy yarns, the basic red heart, acrylic, and that kind of stuff have their place, but we need to make sure that the things that we are doing are going to be soft and nice to be used for the intention that they are being made for. And certainly the hooks, there are different quality of hooks, cheap hooks. My daughter has pulled the metal part out of the plastic from some cheap Amazon hooks. If you watch my other video, I talked about some of those beginner, or not even beginner, but just all-in-one kits that have the hooks and stitch markers and all the case and everything included. She has pulled the metal part right out of the rubber. So definitely something to consider as far as quality for those items. Different handles also fit differently. I can pull out some of my other things here. So there's fatter handles. There are, different size handles here. So there we go. Different size handles. And so we've got an O-fire and a furls. And they fit in the hand differently. So just as different pens give different pen grips, these guys give different grips as well. So if I've been using a smaller hook for a while, I will often switch over to one of these guys so that my hand will hold a little bit differently in there and can help with some wrist and hand issues for that. Another thing, dye lots are important, because even though it is the same color yarn, can you even see this? So this row I ran out of that skein of yarn, and this row is now 2 different colors. So it's there, maybe you can see it a little bit better. Right there you can see the old versus the new, and while this one is not maybe as noticeable, I do have others that are quite different. Even sometimes whites. I had made a chunky upright cat, I believe it was, and I ended up switching skeins for this white cat, and in the light in my room I did not notice the color change. Taking it outside into the sunlight, you could drastically see where the yarns changed. It was quite embarrassing, actually. It was bad. I had no idea, based on my room light and, you know, the different soft lights, LEDs that I have in here, but it was quite obvious in the sunlight, and I was nervous for how it sat there for my show, because it was crazy. So certainly pay attention to that. Just like paint you look at in different lighting and different times of day, you may need to put your yarns together and look at how that looks, not only in your current lighting, but in other lightings as well. Something else is stitch markers are not cheating. So certainly for something as easy as this, I am not really counting. I'm just doing my own thing. But for patterns, I definitely use stitch markers. I want to know where the start of each row is. And because with the increases and decreases, the start of the rows can wander. So just going straight up and down, like you might on whatever creature, isn't always accurate, because that may not be the starting stitch and your count can get off. So definitely something to keep a lot of. I have, you know, just a ton of basic stitch markers linked in, or a box of stitch markers linked in the description with my Amazon list there, the affiliate links, just for very basic stitch markers like these. They are good for, you know, they're good, they're easy to lose, so have a bajillion on hand. Every time we clean my car, we find more stitch markers. But definitely, it's not cheating. They are a good resource. Some yarns, until you get the feel of how that yarn is, stitches can be hard to see. So sometimes you need to just kind of mark every stitch to make sure that you're staying on track with where you need to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. So don't let anybody tell you that there is. Another thing to not be quite so uptight about is some of the gaps in stitches. So depending on the yarn, depending on the hook you use, there can be different size stitches in there. And certainly it is most noticeable when you're using an acrylic and a much thinner yarn. But I have found that so many times the stitches even out with time. As you mold it around, things move, the stitches tend to loosen and even out. And even stitches in the acrylics tend to have more give over time. So when you may be panicking as you are creating the item and trying to figure out how to get tighter, make those gaps smaller, you can only do so much before it starts to affect your hands and your wrists. And it may just be that you may just need to let it be and just manipulate the item a bit to get some of that to relax and move around. All right, so I got some interrupted by children. So I believe I was saying to just give the thing some rest, see how it is, and if there's issues with your tension and your stitches, certainly that can be addressed, but sometimes the yarn just needs to rest and kind of do its thing, and it will fill in those gaps nicely. So the next thing is, don't be afraid to move past beginner patterns. Just like everything is relative in school, or how hard you feel one thing is versus another, beginner plus, intermediate, those all have a lot of I can't think of the term, a lot of, differences between them. So just because one person says that a pattern is intermediate, that may be because of a certain stitch. It might be because of multiple color changes. But that doesn't mean it's not something that you can do. Many times you learn color changes in beginning patterns, so what's adding an extra color change? You've learned lots of stitches in your beginning patterns. Perhaps you've already done single, half, and double crochets. Certainly increases and decreases. So why not take that a step further? Don't let the labels on a certain pattern discourage you from trying. Certainly there are some patterns that have lots and lots of steps, and they can be very, very time consuming. And I tend to not do those patterns. I do not do big dragons. It's just a lot of pulling out some stuff in here. It takes a lot of time, and I have not necessarily been in places where people want to buy those more expensive items. A recent show I got scoffed at for my $30 big turtles. I mean, it takes nearly a whole skein of yarn and, an hour and a half. Am I not allowed to get compensated for my time? So just like everybody, and this will be another point as well, people value and have interest in different things. So don't be discouraged by a label that a pattern has, because it may not be all that different than what you have been doing. So then that leads to that next point, that you can't make somebody understand value. So we certainly see a lot of that in the economy these days, in our government as well. I enjoy museums and aquariums, and we're currently defunding everything. So certainly what I see as valuable is not recognized by everyone else in that same fashion. So I value my time, and those turtles take some significant time. It's also a fatter, chunkier yarn. It tends to have a little bit more wear and tear on my hands and my wrists. And, I have to take some breaks while I do that at times. So I can't make everybody understand values. While they may have no issue with a $6 ice cream cone, all of a sudden a $30 turtle, that's just, compounded effort, compounded supplies, all of that stuff is too much. So blankets tend to be very time consuming, and a number of individuals don't ever get the financial part of that back as far as the time and materials invested, which is why you often don't see makers selling those, because it just is not a profitable way. So All right, now I just need to weave in my end, but I got another ice cream cone done here. Next things, try different things. Plushies are not for everybody. Blankets are not for everybody. I find that doing flat objects tends to be hard on my hands with the way I hold things. Whether it's the way I hold my crochet hook, the way I hold my working material, I find that flat items are harder for me to hold. I have a much easier time holding the round plushies. But there's other people who can't understand how to read a plushie pattern and are much more comfortable doing granny squares and long flat things. Wearables. I have never tried a wearable. So there is room for everybody. If one thing doesn't click, you are definitely welcome to try something else. As a serial crafter, do not give up after your first attempt. There's plenty of opportunity to do the different things, try the different styles. And, maybe it's a problem with the hook. Maybe it's a problem with the way that particular pattern is written. I am used to reading patterns a certain way, and then if I purchase from a different maker and they write things differently, I do end up ripping things out and having to redo things because my brain is so used to doing it one way that when I read it, I'm not interpreting it correctly. So definitely something to think about there. Try different things, try different artists, try different pattern writers to see if it's just the way that they're writing their pattern. All our brains work differently, whether it's, in school, in arts, in life, we all work differently. We all have different ways that we keep ourselves on task and different reminders that we all need for our life. So don't be discouraged if your first attempt doesn't quite mesh with the way your brain works. Stuffing matters. The way that you stuff your items, particularly your plushies, are going to make a big difference. If you overstuff things, you're going to lose some of your definition in your different parts. You may have a round snout instead of a more flat snout. All of the stuffing matters. So you need to make sure that as you stuff, you are doing it intentionally and not just shoving it in to make it as rock hard as you can. That would be my daughter. So stuffing matters. The way that you stuff, making sure that the stuffing gets up into the little eye cavities so they don't sink back in, making sure that we don't overstuff the snout so that we can keep our shape there. It all matters and plays a role in how your creations look at, the end of that particular item. And lastly, there is not a perfect rule for the hook size, the yarn size, any of that. I saw recently where somebody said that they would have told themselves that a size 5 is not appropriate for plushies or for amigurumi. And I use almost a size 5 exclusively with multiple types of yarn currently for my plushies. So the yarn that you're using makes a difference. The hook size you're using makes a difference. The tension I have between, let me find, it's 4.5. The tension I have between this pink O-Fire acrylic hook, size 5, and this clover metal size 5 is different. I do not pull as hard with the acrylic hooks. I tend to pull much harder with the metal hooks. So even using the different hooks, I have different tension. So if I want it to be just a bit bigger than this, but I don't want to go up to, I don't think I have a 5.5 in the clover. I just go up to 6. So I might use this because this is going to be just that little bit bigger than what this is. So there's a lot of trial and error. You need to find what works for you and not worry so much about everybody else's opinion, because your tension is different, your style is different, and you don't have to be like everybody else. So let me know if you have some other tips that you would add to this, or if you found any of these tips applicable towards you. Have you run into dye lot issues? Tell me about some of your crazy adventures with dye lots. I would love to hear. And I look forward to talking with you the next time. Take care.